1. Title asterisk asterisk. I fell asleep in the wrong bed at a Mafia Gala. His grandmother burst in and screamed, "Finally, a bride." 2. Script, voiceover ready, asterisk asterisk. Waking up in a stranger's bed is a classic mistake. Waking up in Dominic Castelli's bed, the ruthless head of the Chicago syndicate, is a death sentence. But before panic could even set in, his terrifying grandmother burst through the mahogany doors, clapped her hands, and shouted, "Finally, a bride." Exhaustion is a dangerous drug. It blurs your vision, numbs your common sense, and makes a king-sized mattress in a mafia don's private estate look like a perfectly reasonable place to take a 5-minute nap. My name is Harper Russo, and I am or was a senior event coordinator for Silver Spoon Catering. We were working the most high-stakes event of the decade, a legitimate business gala hosted by the Castelli family at their sprawling, fortress-like estate in Lake Forest, just north of Chicago. I'd been on my feet for 18 straight hours. My plus-size frame, which usually gave me a commanding presence when I was directing terrified waitstaff, was currently working against me. Every joint in my body screamed in protest, and my black orthopedic work shoes felt like torture devices. It was 3 a.m. The gala was winding down into a haze of expensive cigar smoke and top-shelf bourbon. My manager, a notoriously cruel woman named Brenda, had snapped at me to head up to the third-floor staff quarters and inventory the remaining linens. But the Castelli estate was a labyrinth of vaulted ceilings, identical marble corridors, and heavy oak doors. I took a wrong turn into the East Wing. I didn't know the East Wing was entirely off-limits to everyone except the Don himself. I opened a set of double doors, expecting to find folding tables and stacks of tablecloths. Instead, I stepped into a room that smelled of cedar, expensive leather, and a sharp, intoxicating cologne. Moonlight spilled through floor-to-ceiling windows, illuminating a massive four-poster bed draped in charcoal silk. I didn't see any mobsters. I didn't see any guns. All I saw was that bed. Just 5 minutes, I told myself, slipping off my torturous shoes. Asterisk, I'll just rest my eyes for 5 minutes. Then I'll go find the linens, asterisk. I crawled onto the mattress. I didn't even pull the covers up. I just sank into the impossibly soft duvet, let out a long sigh, and the world went black. I didn't wake up 5 minutes later. I woke up to the sensation of crushing weight and intense heat. The room was bathed in the pale gray light of early dawn. I blinked, my brain foggy, trying to orient myself. Why was the staff cot suddenly so soft? Why was it so warm? Then I felt the arm. A heavy, violently muscular arm draped across my stomach, pinning me securely to a solid, incredibly hot body. The hand resting near my waist was massive, the knuckles scarred, and crawling up the forearm was a distinct, terrifying tattoo, a black serpent winding around a dagger. My blood turned to ice. Even civilians in Chicago knew that tattoo. It belonged to Dominic Castelli, the Don, a man who allegedly dismantled a rival smuggling ring on Rush Street with his bare hands just 2 years earlier. I stopped breathing. I was in the Don's bed. And the Don was in the bed with me. He'd evidently come in late, exhausted himself, and simply crashed into his own bed without turning on the lights, pulling me against him in his sleep as if I were a giant, terrified teddy bear. Carefully, agonizingly, I tried to slide my body off the mattress. I was a thick, curvy woman. Stealth was not exactly my forte, but adrenaline made me light. I shifted my hips. The arm tightened around my waist like a steel vise. "Don't move." A voice rasped, a dark, gravelly sound that vibrated against my spine. I froze. My heart hammered wildly against my ribs. I can explain," I stammered, my voice barely a whisper. "I'm the caterer. I got lost. I'm leaving right now. Please don't kill me." Before Dominic could respond, before he could even open his eyes to look at the trespasser in his bed, the heavy double doors of the master suite flew open with a resounding bang. The bright overhead chandelier flicked on, blinding us both. "Dominic," a sharp, commanding voice barked in heavily accented English. Dominic groaned, sitting up and pulling the silk sheet over his waist. I scrambled backward against the headboard, pulling a pillow over my chest in sheer terror, fully expecting a barrage of bullets. Instead, standing in the doorway was a tiny, fierce-looking, elderly woman in a pristine floral bathrobe, flanked by two massive men in tailored suits holding submachine guns. It was Rosa Castelli. Nonna Rosa. The true matriarch of the family. Nonna Rosa's sharp, hawkish eyes darted from Dominic's bare, heavily tattooed chest to me. She took in my messy hair, my catering uniform, and the way I was clutching the pillow. I braced myself for the end of my life. Instead, Nonna Rosa let out a dramatic gasp, clasped her hands together, and beamed. "Praise the saints," she declared loudly. "I knew you had sense, Dominic. A real woman. Look at those hips. Look at those thighs. Finally, a bride with curves. Not like that walking skeleton, Victoria Marino." I blinked. A bride? Dominic rubbed his face, clearly trying to process the chaos. He turned his head and finally looked at me. His eyes were a startling, piercing amber. He looked at my terrified face, then his gaze swept over my soft, full figure, pressed against his headboard. I expected disgust. I expected rage. Instead, a slow, calculating smirk spread across his perfectly sculpted face. "Surprise, Nonna," Dominic said smoothly, his voice devoid of any panic. "Meet my fiancé." "Fiancé," I choked out. But the word was immediately drowned out by Nonna Rosa's ecstatic cheering. "Matteo," she barked at the giant of a man holding an MP5 to her left. "Call the event planners. Cancel the Marino arrangements. Throw away those hideous white lilies, they look like a funeral. We need red roses. And call Vera Wang. This girl needs a custom gown. Something that shows off her chest. We have a wedding in 2 weeks." 2 weeks? I squeaked. But Matteo was already nodding, speaking rapidly into an earpiece. Nonna Rosa blew us a kiss and marched out of the room, the doors shutting firmly behind her. The silence that fell over the master suite was deafening. I turned slowly to look at Dominic. He was already out of bed, pulling on a pair of dark slacks. He was terrifyingly gorgeous, every inch of him coiled with a dangerous, predatory grace. "What did you just do?" I whispered, my hands trembling so hard. "Who is Victoria Marino? Why did you tell her I'm your fiancé?" "I'm Harper. I cater." Dominic walked over to a crystal decanter on a side table and poured himself a glass of amber liquid, despite it being dawn. He took a sip, his amber eyes locking onto mine. "Victoria Marino is the daughter of the Marino family boss," Dominic said, his tone all business now. "Our families have been at war for a decade. A truce was brokered. The condition was a marriage between me and Victoria. But my intelligence intercepted a message yesterday. The Marinos aren't planning a truce. They're planning a massacre. The moment I say I do, my entire family gets slaughtered at the reception." I swallowed hard, feeling sick. "So call it off. Tell the police. Tell your grandmother." "You don't call the police in our world, Harper," he said softly, walking toward the bed. "And you don't break a mafia contract without a valid blood reason. If I just cancel, the war starts today. But there's a loophole in the old Sicilian laws. A prior, consummated engagement to an outsider nullifies a forced union. It's an old rule, but the Marinos are traditionalists, they have to respect it. It buys my family time to prepare for the fallout." "Okay, but why me?" I asked, gesturing wildly at myself. "Look at me. I'm a size 16 caterer from the South Side. No one is going to believe a billionaire mafia boss is secretly engaged to a girl who accidentally passed out in his bed." Dominic stopped right in front of me. He leaned down, placing a heavy hand on the mattress right next to my hip. The scent of him, cedar and danger, enveloped me. "Don't do that," he said, his voice dangerously low. "Do what?" Talk about yourself like you're not worthy of being in my bed, he murmured, his gaze dropping to my lips. Nona wasn't lying. I hate skinny women. You are exactly my type. And more importantly, you're exactly what I need right now. He pulled back, his business mask slamming back into place. Here's the deal, Harper. You pretend to be deeply in love with me for the next 6 months. You live here. You go to the fittings. You smile for the cameras. You help me sell the lie that we've been secretly together for a year. In exchange, I pay you $2 million in cash, deposited into an offshore account in your name. When the dust settles, we file for a quiet divorce, and you walk away set for life. $2 million. My mother's medical bills, my crushing student debt, my miserable life under Brenda at the catering company, all of it could be erased. And if I say no? I asked. Dominic's eyes darkened. The Marinos have informants everywhere. If you walk out that door, you're just a caterer who heard too much. They'll put a bullet in your head before you reach the subway. Being my fiancé is the only thing keeping you alive right now. I didn't have a choice. I was a hostage in a gilded cage, draped in silk and a $2 million promise. Okay, I breathed out. Okay, I'll do it. Good, Dominic said. Matteo will escort you to your apartment to pack your things. You move in today. And Harper, I looked up. You'd better learn how to act like a mafia queen fast. The wolves are already circling. 2 hours later, I was standing in the hallway of my dingy apartment building in Lincoln Park. Matteo, looking entirely out of place in his sharp bespoke suit, waited by the stairwell. 5 minutes, Miss Russo, he grunted. I nodded, unlocking my front door to grab some clothes and my cat, Barnaby. But as the door swung open, my blood ran cold. The apartment was trashed, the couch slashed open, my books thrown everywhere, the television shattered. Standing in the middle of the wreckage, holding a silenced pistol, was my ex-boyfriend, Leo. Leo, who was supposed to be a struggling mechanic. Leo, who had dumped me 3 months ago because he said my weight was an embarrassment to him. He smiled a nasty, sharp thing and aimed the gun straight at my chest. Hello, Harper, Leo sneered. Word on the street is you're engaged to Dominic Castelli. Mr. Marino is very, very disappointed in you. Fear paralyzed my throat. Leo, the man who had shared my bed for 2 years, who had convinced me no other man would ever want a woman of my size, was standing in my living room with a loaded weapon. Leo, I whispered, my voice shaking. What are you doing? How did you get in here? Leo's lip curled into a sneer. You really are stupid, Harper. Did you honestly think a guy like me wanted to be with someone like you for love? I'm a soldier for the Marino Syndicate. We needed a man on the inside of Silver Spoon Catering to map out the Castelli estate for the hit. You were my golden ticket. I only dumped you because I had the blueprints, and I couldn't stomach looking at you for one more second. Tears pricked my eyes. Not from heartbreak, but from a profound, suffocating humiliation. Every insult, every time he made me skip dinner, every time he grabbed my stomach and laughed, it was all a calculated psychological game, meant to keep my self-esteem in the gutter so I wouldn't leave him before his job was done. And now, Leo raised the pistol, aiming it squarely at my forehead. You've somehow managed to ruin a 10-year war strategy by sleeping with the enemy. Nothing personal, Harper. He squeezed the trigger. But the gunshot never came. Instead, the heavy wooden door of my apartment splintered inward with a deafening crash. Matteo, Dominic's bodyguard, didn't even draw a weapon. He moved with a terrifying, unnatural speed for a man in a bespoke suit. He crossed the room in 2 strides, grabbed Leo's wrist, and twisted. The sickening snap of bone echoed through the trashed apartment. Leo let out a high-pitched scream as the gun clattered to the hardwood floor. Before Leo could even drop to his knees, Matteo delivered a brutal, precise strike to the back of his neck. Leo collapsed like a puppet with its strings cut out cold. I was trembling violently, my back pressed against the wall. Matteo calmly adjusted his cuffs, pulled a sleek black phone from his pocket and hit a single button. "Boss," Matteo said, his voice flat. "We have a problem at the Lincoln Park apartment. It's a merino rat. He was aiming at your fiancée." Less than 10 minutes later, a fleet of black SUVs surrounded my dilapidated building. Dominic walked through my broken door like a dark god of vengeance. The moment his amber eyes landed on me, shivering in the corner of my ruined living room, the cold mafia dawn vanished. He crossed the room and pulled me into his massive, solid chest. He wrapped his expensive cashmere overcoat around my shoulders, completely enveloping my shivering form. The scent of cedar and expensive cologne grounded me. "Are you hurt, Harper?" he demanded, his hands gripping my thighs to lift me slightly, checking me for injuries. "Did he touch you?" "No," I choked out, grabbing the lapels of his shirt. "Dominic, he was my ex-boyfriend. He used me. He said he only dated me to get the catering blueprints for your estate." Dominic froze. He turned his head slowly to look at Leo's unconscious body, currently being zip-tied by two of his men. A dark, terrifying shadow crossed his face, the face of a man who ruled the Chicago underworld. "Matteo," Dominic said, his voice dropping to a lethal, quiet register. "Take him to the warehouse on the south side. I want every piece of information in his head before morning. Then make sure he never sees daylight again." He turned back to me, his thumbs gently wiping a tear from my cheek. "He's a dead man, Harper. No one points a gun at my future wife and lives." "But I'm not really your wife," I whispered, acutely aware of how small I felt against him, despite my size. "I'm just a caterer he used." He said I couldn't finish it. Dominic's jaw clenched. His hand slid down to my waist, his large fingers digging reverently into my soft hips. "Leo is a blind, dead fool. Do you hear me? Look at me, Harper." I forced my eyes up to meet his. "In my world, men die for women built like you. Soft, lush, real. You are a goddess. And by the time this week is over, the entire city of Chicago is going to know it." The next 3 days were a whirlwind of opulence and high-stakes deception. I was relocated to the master suite of the Lake Forest estate. Dominic kept his word, he treated me with absolute respect, sleeping on a velvet chaise in the corner while I took the massive bed. But the tension between us was thick enough to cut with a knife. Every time he looked at me, his amber eyes burned with an intensity that made my stomach flutter. Nona Rosa took complete control of my transformation. She flew in a team from Vera Wang, demanding they toss out their standard sample sizes. "A woman without a stomach is like a house without a kitchen," Nona Rosa shouted at a terrified French tailor, waving her cane. "She is the queen of Chicago. Give her silk. Give her corsets. Show off these breasts. Show off these hips." When I finally looked in the mirror on the third day, I burst into tears. I didn't look like a clumsy caterer in orthopedic shoes. I was wearing a custom deep emerald gown that hugged every curve of my plus-size body perfectly. The corset cinched my waist and lifted my chest, making me look like a Renaissance painting brought to life. My blonde hair was swept over one shoulder in soft vintage waves, and a diamond necklace worth more than my life sparkled at my throat. I looked powerful. I looked beautiful. Dominic walked into the fitting room, and the entire tailoring staff went dead silent. He stopped in his tracks. His eyes slowly traveled up my body, taking in the swell of my hips, the curve of my waist, the flushed skin of my chest. He walked up to me, ignoring the tailor, and placed his hands firmly on my hips, pulling my soft stomach flush against his hard abdomen. "Mine," he murmured, leaning down to press a hot, lingering kiss to the side of my neck. "Tonight we go to Gibson's Bar and Steakhouse on Rush Street. The paparazzi will be there. The Marinos will be there. You let me do the talking. You just stand there and let them see exactly why I canceled a mafia treaty for you." Gibson's Bar and Steakhouse was completely bought out for the evening. The flashbulbs blinded me as we stepped out of the bulletproof Maybach, but Dominic's arm was an iron band around my waist, guiding me inside. The restaurant was filled with the elite of Chicago's underworld, politicians, union bosses, and mobsters playing dress-up. The moment we walked in, the music seemed to stop. Every eye was on us. Or rather, every eye was on me. We had barely taken our seats at the VIP table when the temperature in the room plummeted. Walking toward us was Victoria Marino. She was exactly what society told me I was supposed to look like, impossibly thin, sharp-featured, wearing a slinky silver dress that clung to her completely flat stomach. She looked like a supermodel, but her eyes were cold, dead, and cruel. Flanked by 4 massive bodyguards, she stopped at our table, looking down at me like I was a piece of trash stuck to her Prada heels. "So," Victoria said, her voice dripping with venom. "This is the girl you broke our family's treaty for, Dominic. I heard you found her serving appetizers. Tell me, does she even fit in the cars, or do you have to rent a moving truck?" Before I could even register the insult, Dominic stood up. The relaxed, handsome fiancé vanished, replaced by the apex predator of the Castelli family. He didn't yell. He didn't raise his voice. He just leaned across the table, his eyes locking onto Victoria's. "Speak to my wife like that again, Victoria, and I will personally mail your tongue to your father in a velvet box," Dominic said smoothly. Victoria flinched, taking a step back. "She is twice the woman you are, in every possible way," Dominic continued, his voice echoing in the dead-silent restaurant. "She's the woman I choose. If your father has a problem with the old laws, tell him to meet me at the Palmer House Hilton on Saturday for our engagement gala. We can settle it there. Blood or champagne. His choice." Victoria sneered, recovering her composure. "Oh, we'll be there, Dominic. We'll bring plenty of red wine." She spun on her heel and marched out. Dominic sat back down, picking up my trembling hand and kissing my knuckles. "The trap is set," he whispered. Saturday night at the Palmer House Hilton was the most opulent event I had ever seen. Gold chandeliers, thousands of red roses, a 10-tier cake. I was wearing a custom white silk gown that made me look like royalty. But beneath the tuxedo jackets of the 200 guests, I knew there was enough firepower to start a small war. Dominic and I stood at the center of the grand ballroom, pretending to greet guests. "Leo talked," Dominic whispered in my ear as we smiled for a photographer. "The Marinos aren't waiting for the cake cutting. They're hitting us during the first dance. Do not let go of my hand, Harper." The band struck up a slow jazz tune. Dominic pulled me onto the dance floor, holding my waist tightly, his chest pressed to mine. For a moment, looking into his amber eyes, I forgot about the guns. I forgot about the $2 million. I just felt safe. Suddenly, the grand doors of the ballroom slammed open. "Castelli," a voice roared. It was Victoria's father, Don Marino. Beside him, Victoria pulled a silver pistol from her clutch purse. Dozens of waiters in the room suddenly dropped their trays, pulling submachine guns from the serving carts. But Dominic was already moving. He shoved me forcefully behind a massive marble pillar just as the first shot rang out. The ballroom erupted into absolute chaos. Glass shattered, women screamed, and the deafening roar of automatic gunfire shook the floorboards. But the Castelli family wasn't caught off guard. Nonna Rosa, sitting at the head table, calmly flipped a switch under her chair. The heavy velvet curtains dropped, revealing Matteo and 20 heavily armed Castelli soldiers on the mezzanine level. It was an ambush. The Marinos had walked right into a slaughterhouse. I covered my ears, squeezing my eyes shut as the battle raged for what felt like hours, though it was only minutes. The gunfire slowed, then stopped entirely. "Harper." Dominic's voice. I opened my eyes. He was standing there, his tuxedo jacket ruined, blood splattered across his white shirt, but his eyes were entirely focused on me. "It's over," he breathed, reaching down to pull me up. I stepped out from behind the pillar. Don Marino was on his knees, surrounded by Castelli soldiers. Victoria was pinned to the ground by Matteo, screaming curses. Dominic cupped my face in his large, warm hands. His chest was heaving. "Are you hurt? Tell me you're not hurt." "I'm okay," I cried, throwing my arms around his neck, burying my face in his chest. He held me so tightly I could barely breathe. When he finally pulled back, he didn't look like a man who'd just won a mob war. He looked like a man who'd just found his soul. He reached into his inner pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. It was the contract, the agreement for the $2 million and the quiet divorce. Right in front of my eyes, Dominic ripped it in half, then into quarters. He let the pieces fall like snow onto the blood-stained marble floor. "What are you doing?" I gasped. "The money?" "Keep the money," Dominic said fiercely, his amber eyes burning into my soul. "But there is no divorce, Harper. Not in 6 months. Not in 60 years. You think I'm letting you walk away after this?" "Dominic, I'm just a caterer." "You are a Castelli," he interrupted, his hands gripping my hips, pressing my soft curves against him in front of the entire surviving room. "You are the woman who slept in my bed, who wore my ring, and who stood by me while the city burned. I don't care how we started. I love your heart. I love your fire. And I am entirely obsessed with this beautiful body." He didn't give me a chance to argue. Dominic crashed his lips down onto mine, kissing me with a desperate, bruising passion that tasted of adrenaline and forever. The ballroom erupted into cheers, led by the piercing whistle of Nona Rosa. I had walked into the wrong room by mistake. But as Dominic held me, a curvy, plus-size girl from the South Side, treating me like the most precious treasure in the world, I knew I had walked exactly where I was meant to be. I wasn't just surviving the mafia anymore. I was ruling it. Did this pulse-pounding mafia romance leave you breathless? If you loved watching Harper embrace her curves and claim her mafia king, drop a like on this video. Share this story with your friends who love a fiercely protective alpha and a curvy queen who gets her happily ever after. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and ring the bell so you never miss another dramatic, swoon-worthy romance story. Let us know in the comments, what would you do if you woke up in a Don's bed?